Howdy everyone, I'm the Shadow of the Hawk. Yes, okay, I'm talking about this movie again. Strange Magic. It's irrelevant, there's like no reason to be talking about it, but I'm talking about it because I like it. This was a random thought I had when I was walking home from class today. There's a lot of really interesting softcore world building that was probably intentional. And I have no doubt that any of the writers, if they actually watch this video, will go, no, you're overthinking those details. But fuck you. I think they're really, really cool to consider, so we're going to talk about them. And that is the socioeconomic situation of the factions within the film. Because, of course, that's where my mind immediately goes to when I'm watching an animated children's film for little girls. So, what got me thinking about that? One of the songs from the film that I'm just listening to ad nauseum is Straight On. And I don't listen to the actual song version. I prefer the actual scene just because the banter between the two characters of the Bog King and Marianne, I really enjoy. So I'm listening to this, and there's a moment where the two characters use this sort of like fast forward haste speed ability where they just like move really, really fucking fast. It's hinted at earlier in the film with Marianne doing a thing. I can't remember what the thing is. It'll be on screen right now if I remember to edit it. And now you will be seeing the actual scene I'm referencing, the two of them dueling and spinning and going really, really fast. It's interesting that the only people we see in the film who use this ability are the nobility of two different factions. Specifically the Regency, the future queen, and the reigning king. Curious. So now we got to take a step back and actually look at the societies within the films. And they seem to be very much, we don't really get much of the dark forest or the bog, as I prefer to think of it. We don't really see too much of that society. We really only see the military installation being the Bog King's castle, and then the spy network in the form of the mushrooms. But in the Fairy Kingdom, we do see like a level of urbanization with the city, and we can also make some assumptions based on the clothing attire, the fact that there is in fact a king, but doesn't seem to be a ruling council of some kind, and the limited technology of the setting, which I feel safe in saying it is a feudal society based on a rigid caste system. Something like the caste system of Mexico under Spain, or like the Indian caste system through Hinduism. But unlike those systems where it's just different colored humans, it's not. The caste system within the Fairy Kingdom is based on species. Based on a throwaway line by the king to kind of make him a bit of a racist bigot at the end, where he is not distrustful, dissatisfied with the fact that his daughter is marrying an elf, or interested romantically with an elf, in a way that reminds me of a grandmother finding out that her granddaughter is dating, that was phrased horribly, that a grandmother from like the 1950s finds out that her granddaughter is dating someone of the non-white ethnic persuasion. I do not agree with that mentality. That mentality is fucked. It is horrible. It is wrong. I am saying that that is the viewpoint that the king displays upon seeing this budding romantic relationship. So it seems to me that there is a level of species-based supremacy. Because it's not that he's a commoner, it's the fact he is an elf, which seems synonymous with commoner. And as we get a few other scenes, which I will be posting screenshots of here, we see the garb of the elves at a festival, at a very important event. And then we see the garb of the fairies at an important event. And the styles and the clothing of both groups, the fairies look a lot more refined, put together, very noble, while the elves look a lot more rough and tumble. Also, the event that the fairies are part of looks a lot more formal, a lot more like what you would expect to see in a noble's court. And then what the elves are doing is basically just a freaking, I'm blanking, a rodeo. Not a rodeo. I don't know. Well, a redneck party, basically. They look like they're rednecks. Which reinforces the idea that the elves are the dominant population, or rather, the fairies are the dominant population, and the elves are the lower population. why would that be? Why would the fairies be the dominant power? Well, we need to understand why nobilities and aristocracies are able to maintain power and why we no longer have them in the modern day, at least not in any real official capacity. See, back in the ye olde days, power came from who could exert violence. Yes, you'll have argument of, well, culture and religion and money. At the end of the day, it came down to who could amass a larger number of trained, equipped young men to exert force upon other populations. You didn't piss off the dominant religious or ethnic group of a region because you didn't want to piss off their young men to rise up, leave the fields, and start fighting you. So if you have this, so with that context in mind, let's take a look at the fairies and why would they have the ability to exert more violent force upon the elves? Flight. Having aerial supremacy, as we can see in modern day warfare, is brutally effective. I highly recommend reading 7 Seconds to Die, but if you don't really have the time for that, I would recommend watching Battle for Los Angeles to get an understanding of how important aerial supremacy and how powerful air power is. So, the elves conquer the kingdom using the fact that they are able to exert a more violent power over the elves, being flight. Further with that, they augment this with armor. Based on the square cubed law, I believe, something that's smaller, which we know they're significantly smaller based on the scale of birds and squirrels and millipedes and lizards, they're much smaller, meaning they will be, comparatively to a human, significantly more stronger. Now, I don't know the exact scale that they would have. They also look relatively thin, so possibly not that much musculature on them. But suffice to say, them wearing heavy armor shouldn't be too much of an impediment. So, and that heavy armor actually makes things a lot more fair, because where elves would have a level of advantage would most likely be on the ground or in enclosed spaces, because they are stockier, they seem to have more muscle on them, and on the ground, the ability to use your wings isn't very effective. But if the elves can use the fact that they are the nobility to acquire better weapons and armor than the peasantry, the elves, or the fairies get better stuff than the elves, then, well, they can exert power both by air and land. And that is more or less what you see. You see the fairies are dressed in heavy armor when they're soldiers, and are also able to relatively fly fairly effectively. Though they do not just fly everywhere, they spend time marching around, probably to conserve energy, because in a fight, pretty much the guy who doesn't get gassed first is the one who's probably going to win the fight, unless you're, really fucking good or in a spear wall of some kind. And with that thought process in mind, switching over to the bog, the dark forest, the same principle of flight being superior actually is not as applicable, and it explains why you don't really see as many things, many flying things as the Bog King, why he seems to be the only one of his kind, of his race. And the reason for that is the bogs have a lot more positions for things that walk around to ambush out of branches and bushes and dark, scary crags at flying things. The boglins, as I like to call them, are masters of stealth, as we can see in this scene right here. It's going to be playing while I talk about this. They're very good at stealth, and they're able to jump really far, and they have a lot of strength to them. So, a flyer in the swamps is not going to have as much military force exertable as at the open fields of the Fairy Kingdom. Except if they have the ability to rapidly respond to the threats of a ambushing boglin, like the super speed we see displayed by the Bog King. Also, the fact that he has that natural armor would, again, be a sign of his people developing in these swamps. Now, there should be some other ones. We see his mother, so I don't know if he's just like a rare uptick breed, or maybe if only the males appear as him. I don't know why we don't see other males of his species. But suffice to say, you would see that the ability to exert violence is significantly different than in the fairy forest. It also explains why he is able to relatively challenge Marianne after she goes through her girl power montage. He is someone from an environment that has forced him to become a very effective, very brutal, violent killer. We're from a society where you can just look at these fuckers. You can tell that these are the kinds of people that eat their leaders if they don't stand on their own two legs. And talking about this makes me really, really want to look more at this world. Because details like this are really, really interesting, really, really fascinating, and if they were intentional, pose that there is a lot more potential with this world. I joked in my previous video on this topic about seeing them go to war against mice and cats. But, again, if they were willing to put this much detail into... If this was not just me reading too much into this, which it probably is, but if it wasn't, or if they're willing to bullshit and go, yeah, no, this was totally intentional, just imagine what they could do with telling stories about some other kingdom. Maybe some other fairy kingdom decides, hey, we want to conquer you guys, or they have to get into a fight with the ants. Because ants are actually really, really freaking cool, vicious bastards. Kurg's Cast, really, really good series on all the different ant species. The slaver ants, the carpenter ants. That would be really, really cool to watch. Yeah, not much else to really talk about in this. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. See you next time. Oh, and if you disagree with me and you think I'm an idiot, dislike, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your perspective. See you next time.